Let's talk about the best of the worst from Tales of Middle-earth Commander. Normally we'd be talking about the top 3 cards from that set that are seeing play in 1% or less of decks since the set's release. Since there's so many cards that haven't been picked up by the general populace in this set that are so good, I decided we're just going to do the top 6 for this video. Let's get into it. Coming in at number 6, we have Rally the Galadrim. For 2 green and blue, we get a sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. Conspire. Rally the Galadrim is sweet. It does come with the downside of having to target the creature that you want to make a copy of, but Conspire is a cast trigger, so you get to make that copy regardless of if this spell gets countered, so that's pretty nice. You do maybe want to target 2 different creatures, because if they remove the creature that you're targeting, you'll get double blown out if you get the Conspire copy targeting the same creature. But other than that, it's a very cool card. Coming in at number 5, we have Gimli of the Glittering Caves. For 2 and a red, we get a 1/1 legendary creature dwarf warrior with double strike. Whenever another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Gimli of the Glittering Caves. Whenever Gimli deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Gimli is really interesting because he ends up being one of the better 3-mana dorks we've ever gotten, and what I mean by that is if you compare him to other 3-mana dorks, typically they tap for 2 mana, they do sometimes tap for 3 and have restrictions. This guy, he doesn't tap for any mana, he does have to get combat damage in, but he essentially does the same thing. He's going to tap for 2 mana because he makes the 2 treasures. However, what really makes him good is the fact that he's also dealing damage to your opponents. So it gives an extra aspect to your mana dork, which is normally doing nothing besides tapping for that mana. So it does have a little bit of a push and pull, a downside versus an upside, but I think it's really interesting. And if you're doing legendary creature of matter stuff, or if you just have a pretty high density of legendary creatures in your deck, I think Gimli is worth considering. Coming in at number 4, we have Fellbeast of Mordor. For 2 and 2 black, we get a 3/3 creature, Drake Beast, with flying and devour 1. Whenever Fellbeast of Mordor enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on it. Fellbeast of Mordor does have a little bit of a downside in that it doesn't really do anything on an empty board. So having a 4-mana 3/3 flyer is not really where you want to be. But if you're in a deck that makes a lot of creature tokens constantly, then this is a great way to convert those tokens into damage and finish out the game. This is a little bit slow because it only hits 1 person, but if you're able to give it haste, then you can do it twice in 1 turn. So maybe if you've got a lot of haste enablers in your token deck, that could also be a reason to put the Fellbeast of Mordor in. Overall, I think this is a really interesting card and probably worth considering for your token decks if you're in black. In the number 2 slot, we have Gollum Obsessed Stalker. For 1 and a black, we get a 1/1 legendary creature halfling horror with Skulk. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent dealt combat damage this game by a creature named Gollum Obsessed Stalker loses life equal to the amount of life you gained this turn. Gollum Obsessed Stalker doesn't do anything on his own, which is maybe why he's not seeing more adoption, but this card is an absolute beating in any deck that is based around life gain. The fact that he only needs to hit a player 1 time and he'll always remember that they've been hit by him the rest of the game is just insane. We've never seen anything like this card, and I think that it's definitely being underplayed in the life gain decks. In the number 2 slot, we have Archivist of Gondor. For 2 and a blue, we get a 2/3 creature, Human Advisor. Whenever your commander deals combat damage to a player, if there's no monarch, you become the monarch. At the beginning of the monarch's end step, that player draws a card. Archivist of Gondor is really sweet in any of the monarch-focused decks, and I think the monarch players are probably already picking this up. But where I think it's really underutilized and sweet is any deck where your commander is already naturally evasive, or you have the game plan to give your commander evasion. If you've got a deck like that, then maybe consider Archivists of Gondor for your draw slot, because it's just going to draw you 2 cards every single turn, and I don't think there's too many cards that are better than that at 3 mana. Best of the worst is Mists of Lorien. For 2 and a blue, we get a sorcery with Replicate Blue. Return target non-land permanent and each other non-land permanent with the same mana value as that permanent to their owner's hands. Mists of Lorien is a bounce spell. 3 mana to bounce one thing is not that good, but you're never bouncing just one thing with this. Even if you only pay the 3 mana, you're almost always going to be bouncing more than one thing because there's going to be more than one thing with the same converted mana cost on the field. The really interesting thing about this is that you get to choose based off of the game state. So I think you do want to be in an aggressive deck in order to use Mists of Lorien effectively, because just using it as a mass bounce spell and you want to bounce your stuff too, then that probably isn't the most efficient thing. But if you're bouncing somebody's stuff and then killing them with the creatures you have on board, I think this is a really interesting include in any kind of aggressive deck that also includes blue. That's it for Tales of Middle-earth Commander Best of the Worst. There was a lot of good cards in this set, and there's even more cards that I didn't include on this list, even though we expanded it to 6, that I think were worth including. So maybe take a look back at this set and just go over and see what's not being played and see if any of this stuff fits in your deck, especially the legendary lands, which I think are really interesting. Let me know what you guys think about this set and my picks for the list.